Hello everybody. We are ready to have a lesson today in environmental science. This is chapter 1, section 2. It is about our ecological footprints and how they relate to sustainability. So we start at my website just like usual. You're going to click environmental science. When you do so, you'll get here. And we are in, as I said, roll down to chapter 1 and then roll down some more for section 2. That's what we're covering today. Alright, now within section 2, today we're going to cover the PowerPoint, and as we cover the PowerPoint you'll fill out your notes, but there are other worksheets you see within this section that you'll get at Schoolology. Let me minimize this and we'll see what we're focusing on today. Alright, so this is the PowerPoint I'm going to be going over with you in a second. As I go over the PowerPoint, you are going to be filling in your notes. Your notes here go word for word with the PowerPoint. And just like before, at the end of your notes, you will see a student verification page. And what I did is I made an extra copy that is just the verification page with nothing else on it. So it's just that single page because that's all I need turned in. So let's pay attention to what I'm looking for. Your notes are going to be a 35% classwork grade. And I'm going to need signatures to prove that they are done. So first, there's 3 parts to your signature. Oh, also, you know that I prefer the actual signatures. If you can figure out how to work the program, you can get 10 bonus points. If you can't figure out how to get me an actual signature, use cursive font where the signatures should be, but you don't get the bonus point. It's not that hard to do, and once you figure out how to do it, it's just easy, and you'll get the bonus points. If you can't figure it out, just use cursive font down there. Alright, so there's 3 parts to your end of this. First, you're verifying that you have completely filled out your notes and there are no blanks. Second part is that you have reviewed this video that I'm making right now, and as I go through I may be adding extra information. If it sounds important, it probably is. Alright, so you're going to want to make any additions to the notes as I'm talking. And the third part is, as you are watching the video, you reread the whole document to help increase understanding. So those are the 3 parts for you. Your parents will also have 3 parts of this document. Your parents' part, first, that they verified, they looked at your paper and all blanks are filled in. The second part is they are sure that you watched the video while you were rereading the paper. And the third part is they ask you, do you have any questions? They ask you that. Okay, that's the third part. And it's okay if they don't know. If you guys can't figure it out together, if you have a question and you guys can't figure it out together, email me. But they need to ask. That's the third part. Alright, so once you guys get that done, then you're going to send that in. That is worth 35%. It's a classwork grade. Alright, so let me minimize this and we will go ahead and start our PowerPoint. Alright, let's get into this discussion. Alright, so also, excuse me, the air is out at my house. That's why I look as rough as I do. No air conditioning. Fun. Alright, so environmental science. Okay, so this again I said is our ecological footprints. Part of the beginning of this chapter is you will do your the gray box that goes with the chapter. You'll turn these into a question if they're not already one, and then answer it. Copy and answer, and then define all of the vocabulary notes, and within this section somewhere from the beginning of section 2 to the end of section 2 there are 4 checkpoints. They are usually orange. They need to be copied and answered. And as we discussed in section 1, there's nothing I can do about cut and paste. So just make sure everything's on there. Okay, make sure it's 100% complete and thorough. Alright, so get that whole thing on there. That is what I call the gray box, and I don't have the page number listed, but when you're looking at your book, you'll see it. Okay, it's the very first page of section 2. Alright, so with getting on into this, humans have the power to degrade or sustain the Earth's life support system. We've talked about a lot of it, degrading the natural resources in section 1. It is very easy for us, and we know we can tear the world apart really easily. We have plenty of examples of us doing so, but we can also build it up and protect it. That's what we need to focus on. Okay, so over time, the growth of our ecological footprints are going to deplete and degrade the Earth's natural resources. So what we need to do is keep our ecological footprints as small as possible. And when we get further into the section, I'll explain more about what that is. But we want to know, environmental science is always talking about doom and gloom, where the glaciers are melting, the animals are dying, and everything is horrible, and climate is changing, and all of that stuff is true. But is there any good news? All right, there's a little bit. Okay, the good news is right now a lot of people have a much better quality of life, all right, than ever in the whole history of the world that we ever used to have. So as the world's dominant animal, humans have an awesome power to build or tear apart. Okay, so collectively, people have the power to decide such matters as whether a forest is preserved or cut down, whether a river is dammed up or allowed to flow. We can make these decisions. Our actions will have an impact on the temperature and the atmosphere, and the temperature of the atmosphere, and the temperature and the acidity of the ocean, and which species will survive or become extinct. We make these decisions with the choices we make. All of these decisions, and so that gives us a lot of power. Of any animal on the planet, we are the most powerful. So with our better quality of life, we have creative thinking, economic growth, scientific research, a lot of grassroots political pressure by citizens, and regulatory laws are trying to push towards reform, trying to make things better. All of these things together have improved the quality of life for many, many of the Earth's people, especially in the U.S. and the other more developed countries. And that's how we're going to talk about it. We say more developed and less developed countries. When we used to say third world countries, but that's not very nice. It's actually not nice at all. So we say more developed and less developed, or developing. Okay, so that's how we'll talk about the different types of countries. The developed countries is United States, Canada, Japan, England. Okay, all of those as Germany, Russia. The less developed, the some of the ones in Middle America and in Africa, some of those are a little less developed. All right, so many people have a better quality of life still. So humans have developed an amazing array of useful materials and products. We've learned how to use wood and fossil fuels, the sun, the wind, a nuclear form of atoms. God, yeah, we learned how to use nuclear. And the Earth's heat, which is geothermal energy, all of those things are going to supply us with enormous amounts of energy. And we live and work in artificial environments in the forms of buildings and cities. And what that means, this fourth bullet right here, the fact that we can live and work in artificial environments means that we can colonize anywhere over the whole planet. Humans as a species, we can only live, if we didn't have our houses and stuff, we could only live at about between about 40 degrees to about 100 degrees. Okay, that's about all we could live. We'd have to have a lot of water around. We couldn't live in deserts. We couldn't live anywhere far north or far south because we'd never survived the winters. However, we learned to make artificial environments for ourselves. We can live anywhere on the world because the environment no longer changes us. We change our environment, which gives us even more responsibility. We have to be very careful as to what we're doing. We invented computers to extend our brains and robots to perform repetitive tasks that we don't have to do anymore, and even with more precision than we ever could do. Electronic networks to enable us global communication instantly. All of those wonderful things. That's a lot of great things that we can have right now. The fact that I can talk to you and I don't even know where you are right now. That's pretty amazing. All right. So globally also, lifespans are increasing and infant mortality is decreasing. We're living longer and fewer babies are dying in infancy. We have improved food and water and air quality. We have access to education most everywhere. That's one of the main problems we'll talk about when we want to bring, if we want to bring developing countries up into developed countries, they need access to education. That's the main thing, especially for women. Disease prevention, population growth is slowing down, which is great. Some of the species and ecosystems are being successfully protected. We are making some progress about protecting some of the species and some of the ecosystems. And forests are even growing back in some areas. Every once in a while there's like good news where there's an animal we thought was extinct and we find it again. Every once in a while, especially since we've been all cooped up with COVID. We're cooped up with COVID. We can't go outside as much as we used to, and so nature gets to come back again. So it's pretty amazing. And technology is improving our communications. We use scientific research and technological advances financed by affluence, meaning financed by the rich. The richer a country or the group of people are, the more of these things they can have. This has helped achieve improvements in life and environmental quality. All right, so with the affluence of the developed countries comes this increase of technology. And what we have to do is share it or find ways that the less developed countries can have this as well. Education has spurred many citizens to insist that business and governments work towards improving equality. Once you know more, you know that everybody should be treated equally. The more you know, the more you realize people should be treated well. And so people have learned a lot about how the earth works and how to identify environmental problems with their causes and solutions. Sometimes we don't always find solutions, but sometimes we find solutions. Okay, and then with the internet and mobile phones, the humans are a connected species. Okay, we're growing access to information that could help a society shift to a more sustainable path. The more people are talking about it and planning it and making plans for it, the more possible that a sustainable future can happen. Okay, but of course, yeah, it wouldn't be environmentalist if we didn't have bad news. We always have bad news. We thrive on bad news, and that's just kind of sad. But here's what it is. Humans are living unsustainably, and there is a lot of environmental degradation. Environmental degradation is where the waste and depletion and degradation of the Earth's natural capital. We are ruining our resources, polluting our waters, and all of that stuff. Tragedy of the commons is one of the things we're going to work on with this section. I have a whole little mini lesson on tragedy of the commons. It's where a large number of people will exploit a shared or open access resource. Let me try again. It's been a long day. A large number of people are going to exploit a shared or open resource unsustainably. What happens is that if no one person in particular owns it, then everybody feels like they can use it, and they don't care about rebuilding it because they always push that off on somebody else. Let's read this little quote thing here. The little bit that I use or pollute is not enough to matter. However, if the level's small, this logic works, but eventually, however, the total effect of large numbers of people using and exploiting and polluting and degrading this resource is going to exhaust it and ruin it. And then nobody benefits at all. Everybody loses, and that's the tragedy. So the commons is, think about when we were still about 1800s, right around just before the Industrial Revolution. Kind of think about that. Think about peoples with the farms and the villages. People who have sheep and goat and cows and stuff, they would often share pasture land. One person's field wasn't enough for a pretty decent flock, so they would eat. This person would take his sheep here, and this person would take his goats there, and they'd kind of all intermingle. Okay, and then they drive them back into their own barns at night. Now the thing about it is when somebody gets, say that there's 20 acres of feeding land available, and okay, math is not my thing. I'm just going to make it easy. Say there's 20 acres of field available, and you need 1 acre per cow for the year. Okay, that means you can feed 20 cows on that land. Well, since it's area group land and it's not necessarily owned by anybody, this guy says there's 20 acres here. I can get 20 cows. Well, this other guy also says there's 20 acres here. I can get 20 cows. And that one says there's 20 acres here. I can get 20 cows. And now all of a sudden you have 30 cows trying to eat off of what? You have 60 cows trying to eat off of what only 20 can live on. All right, you get the idea of what's happening. We are using it up way too fast. Okay, you have examples in the mini lesson that I've got for you, including atmosphere, ocean, and fish, and land. It happens all the time. Whenever you have group area, it's very hard to pin down who is overusing and who is polluting and who needs to clean it up and how we need to share. Okay, it's called the tragedy of the commons. Now, the human activities have already overused about 60% of the Earth ecosystem services, mostly since 1950. About the time we got really into the new modern age, with like microwave dinners and plastic forks. About the same time we invented those things is about the time we started ruining the world with too much trash and too much pollution and overusing our resources. The United Nations warned that human activity is putting such a strain on the natural functions of the earth that the ability of the ecosystems to sustain the future generations is no longer taken for granted. There is no proof that our children and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, there is nothing promised. We do not know for sure if they're going to make it. What we've talked about, and what we'll talk about when we get into the populations section, is that we're about like 7.5 to 8 billion people right now on the planet. And when we build our supercomputers with our super brains and they're trying to model what we're going to do with food resources and water resources and stuff like that, every time we run one of these models, we have no idea what to do if our population reaches 9 billion. We cannot feed that many people. None of our models has developed any kind of way that we can make it happen. We cannot feed 9 billion people, yet we are at 7.5, eking towards 8, and still rising. If we continue to rise, we are going to run out of resources. There will be resource wars. They will fight over food and fight over water, and of course you're going to have the ones who have and the ones who have not. Can you imagine how apocalyptic it would be for these have-nots? This is what they're basing all these movies off of, the apocalypse movies. Because when we have resource wars and when the rich start stealing everything, as they always do, the poor has less and less and less. And if we hit 9 billion, there's no way that they can get what they need. So although the problems are extremely complex, they're scientific and economic and political, we can sometimes find solutions if we all work those three areas together: scientific, economical, and political solutions. Okay, we could and should be implemented. They should be implemented within the next decades. We have to move fast, which is, I'm talking about the time we turn over the planet to you guys. You guys are our juniors and seniors. About the time we let you loose in the world, we're going to need your generations to start working on some of these problems. My generation and the generation before have been working, but we haven't come up with anything yet. And so it's going to be up to you guys to come up with some good, sustainable decisions. All right, so hang on, this way. All right, so the United States is classified as economically, all of the world states, as I said, are considered more developed or less developed based on their primary or average income per person. Okay, the more developed countries, that's only 17% of the world: United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, and Western Europe. And the less developed countries, look at that, 83% of the world is considered with the less developed. All right, you have middle income areas where they're moderately developed: China, Brazil, Thailand, Mexico, and then really low income, the very less developed, like in the Congo and Haiti. So we use these distinctions to help judge the differences and to base it. But 17%, this 17% more developed, they have more money, they use more resources, they use way more than that whole 83% altogether. All right, so some of the degradation of the resources: we have air pollution, climate change, shrinking forests, degraded natural wildlife habitat, species extinction, soil erosion, aquifer depletion. Do you guys remember what an aquifer is? It's an underground storage place for water that we can drill into for wells and such. Okay, aquifer depletion, declining ocean fisheries, water pollution, all of those things are degrading our capital. Okay, now pollution causing environmental problems. I have a whole pollution section for pollution in the ocean. So pollution, contamination of the environment. Pollution is contamination of the environment by any polluting substance, any pollutant. It can be chemicals, noise, heat, anything at certain levels can be considered harmful to the survival of organisms. Some of it's naturally occurring, like volcanoes are incredibly polluting, but most of it is contributed by humans. Okay, the burning of fossil fuels for industry, agriculture, transportation, all of those things. Now there's two types of pollution. There's point source pollution and non-point source pollution, and their definitions, you kind of can figure out what they are. So with point source solution, you have a single identifiable source where the pollutants are discharged, like smokestacks or motor vehicles, chimneys, drainage pipes. There is somebody you can point at and say, that is your fault, clean it up. point source pollution. Non-point source solution, it's kind of dispersed, and the sources are more difficult to pinpoint. So the examples are like runoff from farm fields, trash in the streams, deposition of air pollutants on land. And since these are so much harder to pinpoint, the people doing it get away with it. And so it continues. All right. And it's sort of like the same idea of, and this is one thing that some of you guys might do. And if you do, you need to stop. Okay. Not everybody knows this. But if you're changing your oil on your car, and a lot of people do this. Okay. Don't do this. A lot of people, when they're changing the oil on their car, will drive their car over one of the storm drains on the road, and they let it dump down in there. Okay. That is horrendous. Don't do that. But a lot of people do. Okay, and they can't get blamed for it because you can't pinpoint where it came from. But that stuff is horrendously awful for the water supply when it gets in there. When it goes to the water treatment plants, it's almost impossible to clean up so that we can either reuse this water for ourselves or for agriculture or for anything at all. Once you've done that, the water is pretty much just trashed. But that's a non-point source pollution. We can't actually pinpoint that on anybody unless you see them specifically on the street. And if you do, you tell them to stop. If it's anybody in your household, you tell them, get one of those, bucket things, all right, and take it to AutoZone or wherever. They'll get rid of it for you. AutoZone or a lot of places will dump that stuff for you. Don't put it in the storm drains. All right, now, how are we dealing with pollution? Do you see this picture? I think no. This, I do have a little exercise using that thing. So that is actually supposed to be a gorgeous, gorgeous beach, but you can see all this trash that's on it. So how are we dealing with pollution? So pollution cleanup means post-production. It's already happened. We're trying to clean it up. It's the dilution and reduction of pollutants. So filters on the smokestacks and car exhausts and treating the polluted water. That's pollution cleanup. Pollution prevention is way better because it's before the pollution ever occurred. So it's going to reduce or eliminate the production of the pollutants. By that, we need pollution laws, greener technology, greener designs. Prevention is way less expensive than cleanup. Considering I wouldn't want to get on that beach and try to clean that up. It's gross, it's dirty, it's hot, it's disgusting. It would be better that it just wasn't there. You see what I'm saying? So prevention is much better than cleanup. Much less expensive and much easier to handle. Now, this chapter is about ecological footprints, and so we need to discuss, well, what is an ecological footprint? All right, so a footprint, I'm going to do the definition first, and then I'll come back up to the top. All right, so your ecological footprint is the amount of land and water that one person, land and water, yeah, pretty much, because everything can, land and water that one person would need to supply for everything that they would need. Okay, it's the amount of land and water needed to supply the individual with renewable resources and to absorb and recycle the waste made by that person. All right, so it's not really a footprint, but it's how much of the earth you need to take care of everything you need. So when we overuse and we misuse our renewable resources, we wind up with a bigger footprint. If we're using more than we should be, our footprint gets bigger. If we're making more waste than the earth can fix, our footprint is bigger. That means the bigger our footprint is, the less somebody else has. So overusing and misusing the renewable resources can result in the natural capital degradation. It can reduce in pollution and waste. And the extent of that harmful environmental impact is what we measure with the footprint. Okay, so the footprint is the amount of land or water needed to supply an individual or a whole population, because we consider the United States has a way bigger footprint than, say, Brazil. Okay, the United States has a way more bigger ecological footprint than Brazil would. So it's the amount of land and water needed to supply an individual or a population with renewable resources that they need and to absorb and recycle the waste that they make. The size of the footprint is also proportional to the amount of renewable resources consumed. So the more resources you consume, the bigger your footprint is, and that means you're taking more than you should. So all of our ecological footprints are going. So the growth of the ecological footprint leads to the degradation of the natural capital, and it results in the creation of pollution and waste. If you are taking more than the earth can fix, you're polluting. The ecological deficit occurs if the footprint is larger than the capacity to replenish. Okay, like I just said, if you are taking more, You're taking more resources and taking more resources, making more trash than the earth can fit, okay? Okay, you're taking all of this and making all of this trash. The earth can't clean it up behind you. So there's an ecological deficit. The earth can't keep up with the mess you're making. An ecological deficit. So it occurs when the ecological footprint is larger than the earth's capacity to replenish and absorb the waste. So as the ecological deficit indicates that humans are living unsustainably. So globally, the humans are running up a huge deficit, and it's expected to keep growing. So the more we use and the more trash we make, the earth can't fix it fast enough. That's the ecological deficit. And we are running a huge difference. Okay, at first, just before the Industrial Revolution, we pretty much grew our own stuff. We didn't make too much waste. We didn't pollute very much. The earth was able to clean up behind us. All right. And then as we got into the Industrial Revolution, and the population started growing. We're taking more resources and making more trash. And as we do so, the ability of the earth to clean up after us gets smaller and smaller because the footprints are so big. So the deficit increases. Okay, the earth can't keep up with the mess we're making. So there's another model besides. So this is all set up to judge how fast we're going to run out of resources. That's what we're doing here. The size of the footprint lets us know how fast we're going to run out of resources, but this IPAT model is another way for us to learn or measure how fast we're running out of resources. So IPAT is another way. So I'm going to go over this. They're all defined right here. So in the early 1970s, there was a new model called IPAT developed to determine our impact. So the IPAT model uses the impact here, I, of human activities is the product of three factors: population size, affluence, and the technologies. There's a formula. Where's the formula? Shoot, hang on, sorry. I'm going to flip through a couple screens so I can figure out where this formula is. Oh, it's supposed to be right here on this page. Anyway, so just read it like a word problem in math, okay? There's supposed to be a formula, but it's not here. So the impact of activities is the product of three factors: population size, affluence, and the amount of technology we have. So I equals P times A times T. I equals P times A times T. It's a math formula that you can plug in. You can plug in population size of different countries. You can plug in affluence, meaning are they the developed countries or the less developed countries. You can plug that in for A. And then you can take technologies. If we have harmful technologies, and then if we have good technologies, so we can subtract one from the other to balance out. So if we have more good technologies than bad, then you're going to have a positive technology. If you have more bad technologies than good, that's going to be negative. All right, so while the ecological footprint emphasizes the use of renewable resources, the IPAT includes environmental of both renewable and non-renewable. Okay, so it figures in the fossil fuels we're using. The ecological footprint is just if we're using the good stuff: solar, wind, water. That's for the ecological footprint. The IPAT handles, well, we're still using fossil fuels. You might as well figure those in. So the technology can either be harmful or beneficial, like I was just talking. So some forms of technology, like polluting factories or gas guzzling cars and coal burning plant, is going to increase the harmful factors by raising the T factors. But if we put in some good, the goal is to decrease the harmful technology factor. So if we use pollution control and prevention technologies and fuel efficient cars, wind turbines, all of those are going to lower our technology T level. And so the more our T level goes down, the ecological footprint will be reduced. So the IPAT model will balance out. I know that's a lot of math. It's okay. All right, so with our quick check of core and ideas, both of these are false. So I want you to, these I think are in your notes, figure out what we need to put for the correct answer. The major environmental problems that lead to pollution are soil erosion, deforestation, and air pollution. The major problems that lead to environmental degradation. Whereas the ecological footprint model emphasizes the use of renewable resources, the IPAT model uses renewable and non-renewable. All right, and that is the end of today, this section of notes. So I'll talk to you guys the next time. All right. See y'all later.